item that's on everyone's mind. How does it work? EXP share. EXP share is a wonderful item. We'll start from the bottom. Gives you 240 HP, which in the early game, a flat amount of HP goes a long way. Every Pokemon gains HP as they level, and you'll notice this about all the held items that provide HP. But the held items provide you with HP right at the start of the game. So at level 3, 240 HP might account for, you know, 5, maybe, you know, 7, 8% of someone's max HP. It might be a lower percent as the game goes on, but it makes you immediately tankier as the game starts, which is already really good. In addition, it provides you with 150 movement speed. And for those of you guys that remember from the Emblems course, each Pokemon has roughly about 3,000 of this movement speed stat. So 150 accounts for about, you know, just about 5% or so. So the movement speed bonus is definitely valuable. It's not the reason why you play the item, though. Okay, the item is played on Pokemon like Hoopa and Eldegoss, the supporter Pokemon who, one, don't scale really well with other items. So items that might deal more damage or tankiness aren't as effective on them. They pretty much require a small amount of farm and they become incredibly useful. So you put this EXP share on them, and then what does it actually do? Cool. So it provides you, on average, you're just going to be getting more experience throughout the game. You're going to be generating more experience that doesn't exist anywhere on the map, but there's some conditions to this. So the first condition, and this needs to be met for you to be able to activate any of the effects that EXP share does, is that you need to be the lowest XP on your team. And specifically, not only the lowest level on your team, but that little ring that you see on your Pokemon, the XP bar, you need to have the least amount of experience compared to everyone else. And only then will you be able to activate the effects of XP share. So the effects are one of the really strong parts of it, and I mean half of the effects, is that you gain additional experience points every single second. So if you're the lowest on your team, just standing around doing absolutely nothing, you're going to gain more experience. In addition, and the part that really starts to ramp up this item is when your teammates get a knockout on a neutral Pokemon, whether that be an Audino in the lane, a Corphish, those crabs, whatever it might be, you distribute the XP such that you're creating more XP than it would provide to you. So let's take a wild Audino, for example. If no person has XP share on your team, the person that last hits the wild Audino, if they're by themselves, they get 100% of it, right? And that's what you would expect. You get 100% of the farm that you took. Now, if you have an ally near you and you last hit it, you're going to get 70% of that XP and your ally would get 30% of that XP, right? Again, that totals out to 100. It's what you expect. You're going to get most of it. Anyone that's near it, they'll get a percentage share of it. If there's more allies, it starts to get distributed across them. But what you need to understand is no XP share, something dies, 100% of it is distributed, typically 70-30. Now, if there's an XP share involved, on the other hand, that split goes from 100% of that Audino to now 130% of that Audino. And typically, and remember, you have to meet the requirements of XP share. So you need to be the lowest XP on your team. But if your teammate last hits that Audino, that Corphish near you, and you're near that wild Pokemon, they will still get 100% of that XP. Normally, if you didn't have XP share, they'd get 70% of it. So they get the full XP as if you weren't even there at all. And then you, as the XP share holder, now you get to suck 30% of that XP out of it. And you've just basically generated more experience. So the way that I want you to think about it and the way I want you to visualize it on how broken that is, because this is what helped me, is imagine you clear 3 Audinos. With XP share on, you've essentially generated a 4th Audino. 30% plus 30% plus 30%, you're almost at 100% of an additional Audino. If you clear it without it, you don't get that bonus. So for every 3 pieces of farm, you're making an additional 4th one. Some additional caveats on this is, let's say the XP share wielder has met the condition that they're the lowest XP on their team and they last hit it, right? This is a common complaint I see a lot of players say. oh, my guy has XP share on, but he keeps on taking all the last hits, and he's not even getting any value off of it. Wrong. You actually, whether or not you last hit it as the XP share holder, does not turn the item on or off. What ends up happening is if you last hit an Audino or that piece of farm as the XP share wielder, it's still gonna do a 130% split. It's just that split is gonna be anywhere between like 70% to the last hitter and now 60% to the non-last hitter. So yes, your ally might get slightly less XP if you do last hit it, but it's not the end of the world. Both parties are still gonna get that bonus generated XP. One thing that I think the reason why people get this item wrong is they think it's XP share, as in you're sharing XP. I would rather have this item been named XP generator, because this item is generating XP on the map that would not have otherwise existed. So you do need to be the lowest XP on your team, and this is why I don't recommend this item in solo queue, is you can't guarantee that you're going to meet that condition of being the lowest on your team. But in a competitive setting, because you can manipulate that and you can coordinate with your teammates, I would absolutely recommend running this item. And this item is so good, and further testing has been done on it. We're seeing teams run 2 XP shares per team. You've seen, seen me do that in some tournaments. You'll probably see a lot more of that upcoming as well. And obviously that means only one person is going to meet that lowest XP threshold, that condition. But what'll end up happening is if they're both the lowest, they'll just bounce back and forth on who's getting that XP share value and who's not. And this one I'm not sure of, but I have a feeling that if they're both the exact same XP, like the same value, they'll both just be considered the lowest and they'll both gain passive experience until that's broken. I might be wrong on that last point, but again, none of this information is detailed in game. It's come purely from community testing. So take that as you will. In your solo queue experience though, I'd stay away from this item. In duo queue and trio queue situations, I think this item can see a lot of value. But again, you want to run it on Pokemon like Hoopa, like Eldegoss, even like Blissey, Pokemon that, are going to cap out at like level 12, level 13 in the case of Eldegoss. Their stats don't really, their damage output isn't what they're being used for, but rather they're being used for their movement abilities or their moves to be able to assist their teammates. So they don't scale well off items. They don't even scale out great off of XP. They can generate more farm for their teammates. The last thing I'll say about this item and what people need to understand what makes this item incredibly strong in a competitive setting is, or even just in a normal Pokemon Unite setting, is once you've played the game enough, you start to understand that as a support, the first time you're going to be using your Unite move is when you hit level 9 or 8 in the case of Blissey, is going to be at the first, or rather the second Dreadnought of the game. So the first Dreadnought spawns around 7 minutes. You're not going to be ready for then. The next one's going to come on around like 4:30, 4 minutes-ish. And most supports in the game, if you've lost the first shred and the game isn't going well for you, you're not going to get level 9. But if you have XP share on, you'll be the lowest on your team, combined with, you slowly ticking away with that bonus experience, as well as sharing some XP to generate off Audinos on the side lanes. You can definitely comfortably hit level 9. Without this item in a losing game, you will not hit 9, which can make or break a game from a competitive perspective. So you want to run this item on supports. You want to make sure in competitive you have it, at least one of it on each team. In League of Legends, the supports have that dedicated support item that's really broken, that can help with warding and whatnot. In Dota, there's tomes and whatnot that get allocated to sometimes to supports as a resource. Think of Unite's version of those XP modifiers or support modifiers. You need it on your team. And until solo queue gets more sophisticated, I would stick away from this item. But I can imagine a world where solo queue players, are going to have supports on every team generally, and at least an XP share wielder. Cool. We're going to go over to Muscle Band next. Another item that's quite complicated. Generally, the Pokemon that use XP share also happen to use this item because they're the ranged Pokemon. But this item is practically usable on every single Pokemon in the game. And the reason for that, and I want people to really understand this, and I think most of you guys that have watched my stream, my videos, you know, you guys are smart enough to know this, but a lot of newer players seem to think that this item is designed for physical attack Pokemon. They read attack speed and a plus 15 attack, and they're like, okay, my Hoopa is a special attack Pokemon. I would never run this item on Hoopa. Wrong. The primary benefit of this item is one, the attack speed, which is beneficial on every single Pokemon in the game. You can go through the attack speed charts. You can look at it. Every Pokemon compared to no Muscle Band, with Muscle Band, with the exception of Cramorant and Charizard, is going to get an attack speed benefit. Attack speed benefits mean more boosted autos. In the case of some Pokemon, that's stun, a slow, bonus damage, all of the attacks. It's always important on Pokemon. And in addition, the most broken part about this item is that every single one of your auto attacks on a 1 second cooldown, so pretty much most Pokemon is just every auto, deals 3% of the target's remaining HP. Or in other game sense, you might be used to that being expressed as 3% of their current HP. So what does that mean? On Pokemon with high HP pools, when you're dealing damage to them, you're going to be dealing damage to them based on a percentage of their HP. So if you're a Hoopa in the lane and you're auto attacking a Blissey who's got like 4,000 or 5,000 HP, you're going to be doing a lot of damage, especially on the first, 30-40% of that target's health. Because remember, as that target gets lower, your Muscle Band is going to do less damage because it's based on how much health they have remaining as a flat amount. But what really makes this item incredibly strong is its use against objectives. So think hitting Dreadnought, hitting Zapdos, even hitting Rotom. These wild Pokemon objectives have such a large health pool that any Pokemon in the game that can get a Muscle Band proc, which you can get on every one of their basic attacks, does an incredibly high amount of damage. To the point where even a Pokemon like Hoopa or Eldegoss, right? These supporter Pokemon that you aren't used to dealing damage are going to deal a considerable amount of damage to these objectives, at least for the first half of their HP. As those objectives get lower, like I said, is based on their current HP, so that damage will come down. But I really want people to understand that this item is pretty much mandatory on range supporters like Hoopa and Eldegoss. It's a large portion of where their damage output comes from, and there's no other damage item that even compares to it. But Pokemon that, are your traditional ADC or attack damage carries like Cinderace, Greninja, Decidueye, all these Pokemon really, really benefit from that 3% of targets remaining HP as well, because things like the Ludicolo or the Buffalon, like those red and blue buffs that you clear at the start of the game, having Muscle Band for the attack speed and the extra damage really increases the amount of, or decreases the amount of time you spend on farming. And you want to be able to farm as fast as you can. The attack speed scales really well with them. The plus 15 attack scales really well with all the Pokemon that are attack based as well. This item is just a lot of value. And to add on top of it, there are some items in the game you can get by that you don't need to level up to level 30. This is one of those items that's not the case. Getting it to level 20 is really important, so you maximize that 3% of the target's remaining HP right here. But what's also really important is this attack speed. This scales based on what level your item is, so you don't want to have this item stuck at level 25. I would even say that I don't understand what the ramifications would be for having this item at level 28. I'm sure it's probably fine, but there could be instances where you're just missing out on an attack speed tier by not having this leveled up. If you need a better breakdown of how attack speed works, my emblems course, which is on the YouTube, it covers completely how that works. If you've seen the attack speed chart, which I can link as well, that will be available. But what you need to know is this item needs to be level 30. If you have a level 30 boost, I would use it on this item. It's amazing. Now, some exceptions to this, okay? And I talked about this, and it's up on the screen as well. We'll start with Cramorant. Cramorant doesn't get any amount of any attack speed from boosting, doesn't get any difference in the rate at which they attack by increasing their attack speed. Their attacks are fixed on a fixed rate, which makes you lose out on a lot of the value from this item. And on top of that, Cramorant's a Pokemon that has multiple other items that would be suitable for them. So you're not going to want to run this on Cramorant. I would avoid this item on Cramorant. And then Charizard is the other exception. this item for Charizard, like Cramorant, also has a fixed attack speed. When I say fixed attack speed, it means that increasing or decreasing their attack speed has no benefit whatsoever. The speed at which they're going to attack, the rate at which their attacks fire, will not change. And in Charizard's case, you might think that, oh, if you're not going to get any attack speed upgrade, why would I run this item? Well, when Charizard breathes his fire and he does his basic attacks, he does 4 instances of damage. And the way the Muscle Band cooldown ends up working out is you can get 2 Muscle Band procs per Charizard breathing fire every time he goes to attack. I think it's on the first auto and the last auto are going to trigger it. So whereas most Pokemon are going to get that 3% per every single time they auto, Charizard is almost getting it twice every time he goes to auto. So this item is really, really, really strong on Charizard. I would not skip out on running this item on Charizard. Even though you don't get that attack speed buff, he still benefits from extra 15 attack and that remaining HP. With this, combined with blue buff on a Charizard, you just rip through objectives really easily. Cool. Buddy Barrier. Now, in the past, this item used to be a lot stronger. It used to give a lot more flat HP on just equipping it. The shield values used to be a lot higher, and the shields used to be able to stack one on top of each other. So if 5 people were running Buddy Barrier, everyone used their Unite move, everyone would give each other a shield and themselves a shield, and those shields would stack on top of each other. So what this meant was most people would run Buddy Barrier, you'd take a Unite team fight, you know, at the Zapdos pit, and, you know, unless, you know, you really were able to severely outplay your team or opponents and bait out their Unite moves, it was going to be incredibly hard to win a team fight if you're behind and both teams use their Unites in the same way. But what this did do was allowed any team to be able to remain tanky. Any team could live at any point, and it was an incredibly broken item. Now, item doesn't work like that anymore. It can no longer stack on top of itself. It gives a lot less HP, and the shield value itself is a lot smaller. That being said, it's still a really, really good item. Its best use case is still going to be on supporter Pokemon. So something like Blissey, really good on. It has a special interaction with Blissey, where Blissey takes, you know, damage on behalf of their teammate when they unite them. You know, you can use that Buddy Barrier to stay alive longer. You can also use that Buddy Barrier to shield someone on your team. You know, it's great on Eldegoss, on Hoopa. Just because they don't have other items that are great for them. Item gives them base HP, keeps them alive longer, it's great. But think about Pokemon that are carry Pokemon, that once they use their Unite move, they either compromise their positioning or they can fight right out of their Unite move. So Dragonite's a great example. You know, you can jump in behind the enemy backlines, and having that extra shield is great. You also have the ability to have your Unite move on a lower charge time if you do smaller Unites as Dragonite. And that's another case where Buddy Barrier can be good. So Pokemon like Pikachu, like Delphox, in the past, maybe even like Talonflame. Anytime you see a Pokemon that can Unite move frequently, Buddy Barrier gets more value simply because you can activate it more often. And if you're going to be fighting directly out of it and you have other kinds of factors in your kit that enable you to take advantage of your higher health pool, it can be really strong. So Dragonite has a passive that gives them damage reduction, makes their shield value even more important. Blastoise and Rapid Spin gets defenses, and Blastoise is generally going to be in the middle of the enemy team. So those Pokemon are great. And honestly, on a lot of squishier caster Pokemon, if you do need some bulk, this item, simply just because you get 450 HP, can be valuable. On a lot of instances for damage dealing Pokemon, when you're looking for a defensive item, it's going to be between this and Focus Band. Generally, you know, both are going to have their use cases. Some are going to be better in different situations. But as a new player or as someone who just needs a generically good build, slotting this into most Pokemon is going to be a valuable option for your team. Focus Band. Now, this item is generally an item. Now, this isn't for every use case, but it's going to be your choice between Buddy Barrier or Focus Band when it comes to an item that keeps you alive. It's usable on every Pokemon in the game, but the item itself When you get low, precisely when you get to a quarter HP or 25% of your HP, you recover HP in increments of every second, and it's 14% of your missing HP. So on average, if this procs exactly at 25% HP, and you heal, because every second you heal, you're gonna heal less from each additional focus band proc, because based on your missing HP, in total, it's gonna recover about 30% of your HP back. Now, if you're taking damage as your focus band has already procced, then obviously you'll heal more because you'll take damage, you'll be at a lower percentage of your missing HP, or a higher percentage rather, and you'll heal more. And for that reason, Pokemon that are constantly brawling, that are going to be in battle and have ways to, you know, either dodge things or to heal on their own, Focus Band will see even more additional value. As long as you don't have other damage items that scale a lot better on you, this item is going to be really, really valuable. So for things like Greedent, Greedent's constantly healing their HP bar back up. They're going from a cycle of low to high to low to high, low to mid. Great item for Greedent. Sylveon with Hyper Voice, same kind of idea. You're fighting a lot. Buddy Barrier might not get as much value because you spend some of the Buddy Barrier value in the air. You have some healing that goes on during it. So Focus Band can be a great item in that case. I have Machamp listed there as well. Champ's a great Pokemon at brawling, especially in the early game. Doesn't have a way to interact with their HP bar very much, but if given, you know, a couple extra seconds to live, Machamp can do a lot of damage. So it can be good on Machamp. You know, a lot of times people might look at Pokemon like Lucario as a great Focus Band user, and Lucario's not an awful Pokemon at using Focus Band, but you might not see a lot of pro Lucarios go Focus Band because Lucario is a Pokemon that scales incredibly off of the damage items. So always remember, when you are equipping a defensive item, you're gonna be going through this thing, and it's a term used by gamers all across games. It's called opportunity cost. Basically what it means is going this item going to cost me the opportunity of being able to go a different item? And for some Pokemon, the answer is absolutely yes. They have too many good items that scale on them. But in solo queue, when you're out there on your own, you can't rely on your teammates to really keep you alive. Taking off one of your offensive items for a defensive item can absolutely be fine. And Focus Band is a great option for that. I would avoid running both Buddy and Focus, because I think you're going to really be lacking out on damage unless you're playing a tank Pokemon like Snorlax or Blissey or something like that. But regardless, this item has an incredibly high power level. It's useful in many amounts of situations. So the standard like Buddy, Muscle, Focus, if you guys have heard other people repeat that, that item build is still going to be good on Pokemon. It might, and it definitely is not going to be the best on a lot of Pokemon. In terms of its passive stats that it gives 30 of each defense, which honestly isn't a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. This is an item that I would say, if you know you're playing a lot of different Pokemon and a lot of different variety, I would leave this item to max towards the end. Obviously it's still good. You get an extra 10 of each defense from level 20 to 30, but on average that's going to give you anywhere between like 1 to 1.5, maybe 2% extra effective HP by just equipping it. And that's not going to go very long. So I'd recommend, you know, things like Muscle Band, items that give flat HP like Buddy Barrier. We'll talk more about the crit items. Those items much more valuable to max out. But you can't go wrong with this item. You know, put it on. One thing you do want to be wary of, and how people misuse this item, is it does have an incredibly long cooldown. One of the longest cooldowns, if not the longest cooldown on any held item in the game. About 90 seconds, 80 seconds at max. So 80-second cooldown. Now, if you use this item, if you have this item equipped and you're just letting your Focus Band proc off cooldown, a lot of times it's just gonna go to waste. You want to make sure that, you know, at 2:30, if you have a Focus Band on, you're not going on taking team fights, because that means for the Zap fight at 2 minutes, it's going to be down. right before a Dreadnought, you don't want to go out and just take a skirmish for no reason. And then on the contrary, if you notice someone has a focus band, if you notice a proc in the early game, and you want to go chase down a target at 230 to get their focus band and get out, it's an incredibly high level play. Making sure an opponent doesn't have their focus band for the zap fight means that they're operating with effectively only 2 items, which can make a big difference. So really, really keep in mind of the cooldown of this item if you are playing it and if you are playing against it. With that being said, I would say I can't think of any Pokemon where this would be horrible to run in solo queue. If you're on a Smurf account, if you're new to the game, I'd say this is one of the first items you want to get and make sure you have level 20 ready to go. Score Shield. This item used to be an amazing item like Buddy Barrier. Not too long ago, it did receive a nerf. One of the biggest nerfs, if you guys aren't aware, is that in the past, when you went to go score, and I'll explain how the item works in case anyone doesn't know, is when you go attempt to score a goal, you're provided with a shield. That shield is based on your maximum health and what level you are. And in order for your score to be stopped, that shield first needs to be destroyed by enemy damage. And in the past, how this would work is if you had any other additional sources of shields, some we've already talked about, like your Unite move, like Buddy Barrier, but even from Pokemon like Blissey on Safeguard, Snorlax giving themselves a shield with Block, Cotton Guard from Eldegoss, all of those shields would be applied before your score shield in effect, meaning that those shields would need to be destroyed before the score shield. And now that has been completely changed. The only shield that's considered when you go to score is your personal shield from Score Shield, which is effectively just over 10% of your max HP, making it very, very easy to break the shield compared to the past. And they've also increased the cooldown. I believe it used to be around 6 to 8 seconds. Now it's 20 seconds long. So this item is very, very, very much so worse. Pokemon you do want to still use this item on in a competitive sense are, you know, your traditional tanks. So Snorlax and Blissey, Pokemon that are played as tanks and competitive, it's fine to use this item on them. It's still a 450 HP item, so it gives what current Buddy Barrier gives. So, you know, your job is to take damage. It's going to give you some HP to take damage with. And in addition, it can be helpful because they have such a high health pool to begin with. Their score shield can be up a little bit longer, and they can use it to turn the tide a battle to break a goalpost before Dreadnought, before any important objective, or to counter score in the late game. So this item's been nerfed. It's not a very good generic item as it used to be in the past. It's got a very niche use case. I'd say it's still okay in solo queue. Combining things like Goal Getter and Score Shield to play that kind of play style, not the best way to play the game, but it's still a viable way to play the game. What I would avoid when it comes to this item, and I think where most people make the mistake, is they play this item on Pokemon like Lucario. Maybe I've seen it on Azumarill. I've seen it on Decidueyes and ADCs. People seem to think that this item is your token to get stacked. And because of the long cooldown on the item and the fact that it just takes up an item slot, means that you don't want to use this item to pair with things like attack weight. And we'll talk about the stacking items. This isn't an item that enables you to stack, okay? It's an item that enables you to score, help break points, give you HP, but don't use this item because you think I'm bad at stacking, so I need a score shield. I'd be happier if you just ran neither item than to run score shield with attack weight. It's not a good playstyle, and it's not a good way to learn the game either. You should be stacking on Pokemon that can get away with stacking or receive such a large benefit that it's okay to go through the risk. Avoid using this as a crutch. There might be use cases for it, but in general, avoid that. But, you know, still a decent item for tanks. It's got some good stats on it. It can be useful. And then the last in this trio that I have is Weakness Policy. Now, this item's unlike the other two items, and this item got a pretty bad rap when it first was released because, you know, it gives a little bit percent attack and it didn't seem like a very high value, but I would say that this item is pretty good. How it works is when you take damage, every instance of damage that gets applied to you, so whether that be an opponent's basic attack, whether that be a move that they use on you, every single instance you take gives you a stack. And those stacks are outlined on the bottom right of your screen. You get a maximum of 4 stacks, and every time you take damage, the timer on those stacks is refreshed, but it only stays valid for 4 seconds. And each one of those stacks gives you percentage based attack based on your base stats. And it obviously maximum 4 stacks. Each stack goes up to 3%, so you can get a total of 12% attack. If you look at the numbers, 12% attack on a lot of Pokemon when they have attack in the range of like 200 to 400 isn't going to give you a whole lot. You know, at best, maybe you're getting like 40, 50 attack. But if you couple it with other attack items, you can get a lot of benefit there. It also just, you know, equipping it in general gives you an extra 15 attack, which is very valuable in the early game and throughout the game. And because you need to take damage for this item to activate, it also happens to give you 210 base HP, which is also very valuable. So you want to use this on Pokemon that are going to be in the fight and Pokemon that scale with attack. So special attack Pokemon that are in the fight, don't use this item effectively at all. I've seen people use this item on Slowbro, being like, oh, I'm going to deal more damage while I'm taking damage. Slowbro takes a lot of damage. PogChamp, no. Item does not do anything on Slowbro. It has to be an attack-based Pokemon. And you want to think of Pokemon that are going to be in the brunt of battle, taking damage constantly and it refreshing. So Trevenant, probably the best use case for weakness policy. Lucario is a fine holder for a weakness policy. Think of Pokemon like Greedent. Think of Pokemon even like Serena. Pokemon that are in the fight and can benefit off of attack. I have Zeraora listed here, and I don't think this is a must-have item on Zeraora, but if you understand how Zeraora's passive works, their passive is a built-in weakness policy, basically. It doesn't work exactly the same, but as they take damage, they gain more damage. Or as they take damage, they gain more attack. So it can synergize decently with Zeraora as well. But these are the types of Pokemon you want to play on. Azumarill even. Azumarill is going to be in there. It's going to increase their attack. Now, some people might tell you, oh, it's going to depend on the ratios. That's how I used to think about it as well. But if you look at every single attack-based Pokemon in the game, all of their ratios happen to be fine. What you really want to think about when it comes to weakness policy are if the Pokemon you're playing is going to be able to get these stacks effectively and be able to fight back once they have the stacks. So something like Cinderace, as you're taking damage, you know, you need to start kiting out, and you might not be taking a lot of instances of damage for this to be up. So it might not be great there. Plus, you also, again, you want to think about opportunity cost. Are there better items for me to run? And traditionally, on range Pokemon, you're going to have much better options. And you're not going to get as much, not much value out of the HP. But some of these Pokemon, those types of Pokemon that you see, they're all really good with it. These are the damage items now we're going to be talking about that apply to physical attack carries. Again, similar to weakness policy, you want to focus this item on physical attack Pokemon. This item, however, can be used on more Pokemon, and the reason and how this item works is every time you activate your moves, one of your moves, for, I believe it's 2 seconds after that, I'm not entirely sure how long the buff lasts, but you gain a buff after using a move, and your next basic attack after using a move deals bonus damage. That damage is equal to 50% of your attack. To put that in perspective, your basic normal attacks deal 100% of your attack stat. So if you have 400 attack, your basic attacks are going to deal 400 damage. If you crits deal double damage. So that would be, 800 damage. And if you have Scope Lens, obviously it increases your crit damage, but let's just take into consideration the raw crits. So crits double your damage. Razor Claw gives you 50% of that as well on top. So this item is incredibly strong for Pokemon that have a high attack stat or Pokemon that can use their moves frequently to proc Razor Claw. So Talonflame, a Pokemon that has incredibly high base attack, Pokemon that can crit, that already has baseline crit rate, a really good case for Razor Claw. They're also very bursty, and because of how this item works, it only revolves around your moves. It does a lot of burst damage, so it's great for that type of Pokemon. Lucario, same idea. Lucario has a really high base attack, but also they have extreme speed, which they can reset after hitting a unique target. And E-speed, your extreme speed, also you can attack during it, which can proc your Razor Claw. So Razor Claw is one of the items that took Lucaria from being like broken to giga broken. It just synergizes incredibly well. It also happens to give you, just on a baseline, more attack and more crit rate. So item is great. Item does have a 2-second internal cooldown. So it does mean that, you know, you might not get it on literally every single E-speed, but generally you're going to get it on most E-speeds anyway. And it also means if you use two moves back to back, like if you're playing like Cinderace and, you know, you use your Blaze Kick and then you dash, you Blaze Kick auto, and, you know, you try to dash right away, you might not get that second Razor Claw proc. But generally you're going to get it on most moves that you use the cooldowns low enough. But what this item is great at is it improves your farming speed early on, because you're basically getting a guaranteed mini crit every time you use a move. So it's really, really strong. And on top of that, you also just happen to get a slow if you're a melee Pokemon. That slow is nice. You know, it's noticeable, obviously, on melee Pokemon. But I feel like a lot of people shy away from this item because they're playing a ranged Pokemon. And they're like, oh, my Pokemon's not going to slow them. It's not valuable. No, it's definitely still really, really good. The typical triple damage kind of loadout on ADCs is going to start with Muscle Band. You're going to want Scope Lens there as well. And because they're not really great at stacking, attack weight's harder to use on them. So Razor Claw is that third item you're going to be using if you're going full out damage. So Cinderace, Greninja, they're really good with this item. If you're not running a defensive item on Dragonite, it's really good. In the past, and I've said this because it used to be active in the past, but Pokemon like Charizard and Dragonite used to proc the Razor Claw slow. They no longer do that. So if you have heard that from someone else or from me, that was a bug and that has been fixed. So that no longer works. But regardless, those Pokemon still can use this item very well, especially Dragonite, because he has a really low move, really low cooldown move to be able to proc Razor Claw very often. So yeah, very, very valuable item. I would play this. I like to play this on Pokemon that I'm already running attack weight on, because attack weight's going to increase my attack up to 100, and then 50% of that can get applied to every Razor Claw proc. So I'm basically getting more value from my attack weight if I couple it with Razor Claw. And then you also get that small little crit rate bump. Overall, it's one of my favorite items in the game. I think it's incredibly broken. It's very, very underrated as well. So yeah, very, very strong item. Its counterpart, Scope Lens. A lot of times you'll see these items paired together. They're the only two items in the game that increase your crit rate. For Pokemon that can crit on their moves, which are only a handful of Pokemon. And if you want to know which Pokemon those are, you just have to look it up on something like Unite DB. This crit rate gets applied to those moves as well. Every time you crit, the damage that your crits do is increased. So it goes from being able to deal 100% extra damage to 112% extra damage. Like double damage, now it's double damage plus an additional 12%. And then on top of that, on top of everything else, you also, every time you crit, you get a Scope Lens proc. So remember we talked about that Razor Claw proc being 50% of your attack? The Scope Lens proc, it doesn't proc when you activate a move, but rather whenever you crit with a basic attack, which happens to be 75%. So think about it, like when you're critting and you have a Scope Lens on, you're almost like, you're like double critting. Right, you're doing 100% of your, you're dealing just double damage with your crit, but you're also dealing an additional 75% damage just off Scope Lens. So this item makes you crit, and it makes you crit really, really, really hard. So a fun use case for this item is something like a Azumarill, where you might think that, oh, a Azumarill already has 100% crit rate. Why would I want to increase my crit rate with this item? I'm not going to run Scope Lens. Wrong. Scope Lens does a lot for Azumarill in a way that it might even make Scope Lens even better on Azumarill, because every time you basic attack a target on their own, you're going to proc Scope Lens. Not a lot of Pokemon can guaranteed proc Scope Lens like that. So it's really, really, really strong on Azumarill. Same use case for Charizard. We talked about Charizard having those four instances of basic attacks. You can pretty much guarantee that at least one of those four is going to crit. So Charizard can crit, Charizard can proc scope lens very, very often. And because each individual crit might not deal a lot of damage, you're still gonna get 75% of your base attack. It's not 75% of your attack, like the attack damage you end up dealing. It's 75% of your base stats. So someone like Charizard, who each individual instance of auto might not deal a lot of damage, they're still gonna get full scope lens value. And on top of that, Pokemon that rely on lifesteal from their basic attacks, when they crit, they're not going to get the lifesteal off the scope lens proc, but they can get the lifesteal off of the additional crit damage or just the crits in general. So that's where you see like big swings in lifesteal is when Pokemon do crit. It ends up being really cool on something like Flail Snorlax that has a lot of lifesteal. But yeah, this item is really, really good for pretty much any Pokemon that's looking to improve their crit, that can already crit. If you're looking to get them to crit, if they rely on their basic attacks, this item will do lots and lots of additional damage. And it's great at increasing your farm speed as well. So you want to be running this item on your ADCs, your attack damage carries, any Pokemon you're looking to crit on. Really, really good. One of the most popular items, at least as of late, is the attack weight. Attack weight increases your base attack stat after every time you score, up to a maximum of 6. So if you see people going for really small scores in the early game, in the top lane, you might see people run by each other just to start scoring. It's because they're probably running attack weight or the special attack or HP counterpart to this item. On a lot of Pokemon, it says high risk, high reward. On a lot of Pokemon, it's not a big high risk and it's a high reward. So something like Lucario, Lucario almost has been balanced around this item existing. If you've ever played Lucario without any attack weight stats, the Pokemon doesn't really even feel broken. But he's got, really good ratios on his moves. When I say ratio, I mean the impact at which their attack stat influences how much damage they deal. So on all of Lucario's moves, damaging moves, he's got great ratios. Same thing for Serena, same thing for a lot of attack-based characters. But these Pokemon, Serena, maybe not as much, but still somewhat. Greedent, Lucario, they're really strong in the early game to exist on enemy territory, take their last hits, and then score it into their base. On Pokemon like your ADCs, like Cinder and Greninja, this item is technically a part of their best in slot when it comes to just total damage output. Like attack weight will almost always contribute to one of the best damage items in the game for those characters, but how are you meant to get 6 stacked on Cinderace or Greninja without the help of other items? It's pretty hard. Generally, you're going to be in the jungle, so it also doesn't benefit you when you start the game. So it's harder to run on this Pokemon for that reason. But if there was a world where you could start in the lane and it was easy for you to stack and you could get stacked up, this item would be the best for them as well. You see this run on Decidueye, primarily because it's one of the only items that they can use that can really increase the damage at which their Spirit Shackle deals. But for Decidueye, it's a very high risk, high reward kind of item. And that's how this item would be for a lot of ranged or squishy Pokemon. What you don't want to do is you don't want to run this item on special attack Pokemon. It does next to nothing for them. But for Pokemon that have healing based on their attack, so Lucario's extreme speed heals, and it heals based on a percentage of their attack. Serena's Queenly Majesty heals and shields are both based on attack. Pokemon that have healing or shielding based on their attack, this item also serves as a further way as a survivability item, which is why you might see Lucario's run no defensive items. It's because they're getting so much healing from their damage output that this is just always going to be more worthwhile. So yeah, incredibly broken item, probably one of the best items in the game where it's useful, but it can be very high risk, very high reward. So special attack items. These items, unlike the attack items, you should only use on special attack Pokemon, okay? This is almost like, and I think Unite devs did this intentionally, but it seems like Choice Specs is the Razor Claw of special attackers. it activates on a cooldown based on when your moves go, and it deals damage based on your special attack. So Pokemon with high special attack stat deal more damage with based on their choice specs procs. And unlike Razor Claw, this item activates on your move itself, so you don't even have to go and physically attack someone afterwards. So you want to use this on Pokemon that have, you know, good poke abilities, Pokemon that are special attackers. The item itself also gives you an incredible amount of special attack. You get almost 40 special attack just for having this item on. And then about half of your special attack gets translated into a choice specs proc itself. So Pikachu, great example, high special attack stat, can get this choice specs proc off every 8 seconds. Espeon with Size Shock, same idea. Venusaur I have up here, and I put it up here because it depends on what build you're running. Now, if you're the Giga Drain Petal Dance build, you'll proc it off of every Petal Dance tick on an 8-second cooldown. So on every 8 seconds, one of your Petal Dance ticks is going to deal bonus damage, or your Giga Drain, depending on which one lands first. But Venusaur has so many better items in that build that you don't want to really waste it on that. In contrast, if you're playing the Solar Beam build, this 40 special attack might not contribute a lot to buffing your Solar Beam's damage because of how Solar Beam damage works. It's based on the enemy target's HP, and the ratio isn't very high. You are always just going to be proccing your choice specs on your Solar Beam hits. So that makes this item really, really good. Also, a really good use case for this item is in the early game. When you go to last hit, it increases the window at which you can go to last hit enemy neutral Pokemon. Just increases that damage range you have on an 8-second cooldown, which ends up being almost every piece of farm you're going to contest. So think about that as you're using this item. Unfortunately, this item, unlike the other ones, doesn't have a visual indicator on when it goes on cooldown. So you kind of just have to know that you have it available. But it's a very, very strong item. It's the first item I pick when I'm thinking about damage for my special attack Pokemon, because not only does it just give so much flat stat, but that activated proc is an incredible amount of damage. I love it. Wise Glasses. Now, if we look at Wise Glasses compared to choice specs, if you could ever only run one of these items, the difference is Wise Glasses gives you 7% attack and 7% special attack, or choice specs on every 8 seconds increases, it gives you a 40% of your special attack as a proc damage. So almost always, if you only have room for one or the other, choice specs is just going to be better. In the early game, that 7% isn't going to contribute to a lot. It's not a lot of stats for a lot of special attackers in the game. But for some special attackers, like Gardevoir, like Alolan Ninetales, they scale really, really well. So on Ninetales, you would play this item when you're playing the Mage build. So similar to Venusaur, they have two different, very distinct builds. One is more reliant on their basic attacks, and the other is more on their moves. And when you're playing the one that relies on their moves, like Mage A9, Wise Glass is a fine item. You know, you want to combine this with choice specs. So your choice specs proc deals more damage because you have more special attack, and all your moves are getting a bonus almost 80 special attack combined with both of these. One thing to note, and this is a question that you guys might have, this 7%, for whatever reason, as far as I know, does not take this 40 into account. If it does, that information has changed, but it doesn't contribute to a lot of stats anyway, but it as far as I know, it doesn't do that. But yeah, you don't want to be running this item obviously on physical Pokemon, and you want to be running this item in combination with other special attack damage items. And I know some people might have questions on emblems and how, you know, the new decisions you make around emblems for special attackers go into play. We'll talk about that as well. But special attack specs. Now, this item, it's the attack weight equivalent, or the special attack version of attack weight. But for special attackers, it's a little bit different. If you could get this item stacked on any special attacker, they would all be good. You know, you end up getting an incredible amount of special attack. For most Pokemon, until they get to level 13 or 14, this item is just always a fully stacked specs is going to outperform Wise Glasses. But it's actually at the point where on Pokemon who have low base special attack, during most of the game, even 2 or 3 stacks is going to just completely outperform Wise Glasses. So Pokemon that are special attack based, but are supporters or defenders, they generally have lower base stats in total when it comes to their offensive stats. So think Blastoise, think Mime, think Blissey. These Pokemon have lower special attack on average compared to the special attackers, but they still have good ratios. They still have good influence from their special attack. So those Pokemon, they don't do great with Wise Glasses. They do very well with this item. A Pokemon like Gengar has really high ratios. So you can combine other glasses and run run special attack specs on Gengar as well. A lot of times you'll hear people call out the triple glasses build. It's a build that's popular on a lot of Pokemon. This is one of the components of triple glasses, and these are all 3 of them. I would say choice specs are probably your most beneficial one. On average, you're going to give you the most impact. But if you can get stacked, a fully stacked special attack specs is going to be superior. So remember we talked about Lucario, we talked about Serena, Azumarill, these Pokemon that, you know, have the opportunity to stack on the enemy side of the base. You want to think of Pokemon, special attack Pokemon that can do that as well. There are a lot fewer examples of these, but Mr. Mime is a great example. Blastoise works. Slowbro is fine. It's a lot harder to stack on Gengar, but if you're looking to maximize your special attack, this is pretty much all you can get. In terms of this, the comparison between you running emblems and having access to cooldown reduction now, which is something we talked last week, it's a choice that you have to make. On some Pokemon, furthering the cooldown reduction is more important, in which case your item slots are going to be reserved for items that give cooldown reduction in Amp and Showbell. We'll talk about that next. But regardless, any Pokemon that in the past used a triple glasses build, or what was really popular on a lot of range attackers is the double glasses plus defensive item build, it's still going to be good. And when I say double glasses, it's generally been choice specs and Wise, and it's been on Pokemon that aren't great at stacking, but do have really good scaling. So something like Gardevoir can use Buddy Wise Choice, or they can use Focus Wise Choice. Sylveon can use Focus Wise Choice. Mage A9 might use Buddy Wise Choice. Pikachu can use that build, but Pikachu, you know, scales well with Muscle Band as well. You know, so it depends per Pokemon, but Pokemon that scale really well with Wise Glasses can use both. Pokemon that don't have good ratios, and the way you look at ratios, you just have to compare them on UniteDB, and there's a percentage-based modifier. Pokemon that have, you know, not high base special attack, they might benefit off more from special attack specs. You just basically have to do the calculations on your own, or trust that when you ask me for a build that I've put that into consideration. But yeah, combining all 3 of these, you can be very deadly. Running any combination of even 2 of them, as long as one of them is choice specs, is generally going to be really strong for you as well. Great tools for special attackers. All these items kind of seem like they have like counterparts, right? Choice specs is like Razor Claw. Special attack specs is like attack weight. And I guess Wise Glasses alternative is like weakness policy, right? Everything has its attack-based or special attack-based counterpart, but they're useful for different reasons. So we just talked about special attack-based items. Now we're going to move on to the cooldown reduction items of the game. These items used to be considered a meme because the amount of cooldown reduction you got from these items was not useful. It was just not enough. But as we discussed in the emblems video, stacking more and more sources of cooldown reduction makes those sources of cooldown reduction better and better. The reason for that is you add up the percentage-based sources of cooldown reduction, and it gets applied to your base cooldown. So going from 30% to 40% is a 10% increase in CDR on your stat, but it happens to be more than a 10% reduction in cooldown. Depending on how long your cooldown is, it could be, you know, like a 14-15% reduction in cooldown. So more cooldown reduction is better. And now that we have an additional source of cooldown reduction in the form of emblems, the cooldown reduction items themselves can get some value. Shell Bell, kind of like how choice specs works, it also has a proc that happens when you land a move. Instead of this move dealing damage like choice specs does, in return the Shell Bell heals you. It's based on your special attack and has that flat value associated with it as well. But because it's on a 10-second cooldown, you don't end up really noticing the effects of that heal as much as you'd want to. That being said, the heal is somewhat valuable on Pokemon that have other sources of either Spell Vamp, which is lifesteal based on your movement ability, on your moves, or if you have a way to heal on your own anyway. That's where Shell Bell's healing can start to add up and maybe be of notice. So Gengar has built-in Spell Vamp, and when you're playing the Hex build, you're constantly diving in. So the healing that they get from their Spell Vamp, procced with that Shell Bell, it can sometimes be the difference between you living or not. So I don't think it's an awful item for Shell Bell Gengar, or for Hex Gengar. Sylveon with Hyper Voice, you know, even the Draining Kiss kind of build with Mystical Fire. You know, the healing can add up and it can maybe make a difference. Same thing with Air/Dive, you get a lot of healing. That healing can add up. It is also a flat 24 special attack, which is comparable to a special attack specs with no stacks at all. So if you were to play a game of Gengar and triple glasses and you never stacked, and a game never got 0 scores in, and you swapped out your Shell Bell for, or your special attack specs for Shell Bell will purely just be a better item. But most of the time that extra healing is going to go unnoticed. Most of the time there's a better damaging item. This item really, when it's getting its use, is when you're stacking other sources of cooldown reduction. So there's emblems, there's baseline, which special attackers get as a part of their kit, and there's Energy Amp. Now, Energy Amp gives you the same amount of cooldown reduction as Shell Bell, so stacking them together adds an additional 9%. You get 8% from emblems, and you get up to 25% from just base stats as you level up. And you can get an additional 20% from your Unite move. You stack all those together, and Pokemon like Cramorant and Delphox, and even Venusaur can get down to 62% cooldown reduction when they're in their Unite buff. So as a cooldown reduction pair, these two items with emblems, very, very strong on the special attacker type of Pokemon. But in general, Energy Amp, it's also just going to give you a damage buff right after you Unite. So think about someone like Venusaur and Delphox. When you use your Unite, you're immediately free to do whatever you want, and generally you're going to be using more moves and dealing more damage, right? So it's a great item on both of these Pokemon. In fact, it's a good item on either Venusaur build, because the extra cooldown reduction goes a long way. We've talked about how that works in the Emblems course. But the extra damage, it gets immediately applied to Giga Drain Petal Dance, because you're going to run in with that movement speed, or it's going to get applied to your Solar Beam and, you know, Sludge Bomb or whatever you might be going. Same thing for Delphox. You know, you're going to use your Unite move, slow them in it, reduce their healing, and then you throw a barrage of your spells on lower cooldown that deal additional damage. For Cramorant, it means when they're channeling their Unite move, each one of those fishes or Pikachus they throw out, more damage. So the damage is definitely noticeable from Energy Amp, but it is only for 4 seconds after you cast it. Your Unite buff that you get as any Pokemon in the game, that buff lasts for 8 seconds. Energy Amp only lasts for 4 seconds. So it's only during the first half of that buff that you get. And I see a lot of people get tricked by the bottom right indicator. And I'll show you this when we go into game to do the testing. That bottom right indicator doesn't show you when your Energy Amp is active. It shows you the cooldown, which is 14 seconds long. So don't think that just because you see the Energy Amp logo on the bottom right, you're getting bonus damage. You're not. You have to physically think about the 4 seconds after you use your Unite move. Then and only then you're going to get the buff. So that means on Pokemon like Espeon, you spend the first 2 seconds almost in the air. You have to mash your abilities as you get out of it, and you're only going to get bonus damage on 1 rotation of your moves. For someone like Delphox, your moves have such a low cooldown that your first 2 or even 3 rotation of spells can get that bonus energy amp damage. The other thing, and this is something people don't think about nearly enough when it comes to energy amp, is that this item offers you absolutely nothing in the early game. It also does help you charge your Unite move faster, which is also listed there. That's something I should have mentioned earlier. But in the early game, you're not going to be able to cast your Unite move, so you don't get bonus Unite move damage. You don't have your Unite move, so charging it quicker doesn't do anything. All you're going to get is 4.5% extra cooldown reduction. And on the Pokemon that you run CDR on, that's not a whole lot in the early game because they need levels to get their cooldown reduction. So make sure when you are deciding to put this item on, if you're replacing this item with something, you know, if you're replacing choice specs with energy amp, just remember you've gutted your early game incredibly hard at this point. So yeah, what I was saying about energy amp is this item is absolutely useless in the early game. Don't run this item expecting you're going to be strong in the early game because you won't. It does nothing for you. I see a lot of people really excited to just drop choice specs, drop wise glasses, and they're like, I'm gonna run energy amp shell bell. Before you get your Unite, you are going to be considerably weaker. Even the item Shell Bell is more valuable than Energy Amp in the early game because at least you get 24 special attack. This and the healing. This item does nothing for you. I'm not saying it's bad, but just try to keep in mind that if you're playing this type of build, you're playing around your Unite and you're playing around the extra levels you're going to get later on in the game. But it's a really good, really good item. To answer people's questions preemptively on how energy rate charge works, because I feel like most people don't understand this, is every instance of energy acquisition for your Unite move has a different rate at which it helps your Unite move charge. So things like dying and scoring have some values. There's values on last hitting minions. There's value over time that you get. All of those values get increased by 6% when you have this item equipped. So if you go into try mode and you try last hitting something with and without energy amp, you might not be able to visualize the difference. And it used to be bugged in the past, so it literally used to not work. But I can guarantee you, on average, you will charge your Unite moves faster with this item equipped. Unless they break the item and it gets bugged again, I know for a fact it works. I hear a lot of different content creators. I'm not going to call out their names. I see them saying that this item, they've tested it, it doesn't do anything. I don't know how they're testing it. I've played so many games with this item on. I know it charges my Unite move faster. It was bugged at some point in the past and they did have to fix it. So I don't blame them for having that information wrong. But this item does work for that case. Just remember, it doesn't do anything until you've gotten your Unite move. So kind of does suck in the early game. Okay, final item that I have in this trio before we break out for our testing session is Floatstone. Now, this item is very different and it's not related at all to the last two items, but it's a very unique kind of item. It's an item that for a long time was seen as completely useless. But what it does is baseline, you get a little bit of movement speed, and it equates to like less than 5% movement speed, like a really small amount of movement speed baseline, and then some base attack as well. And 24 attack is a reasonable amount. So before Razor Claw existed, playing this item simply for attack would have been worth it. Nowadays, there's other items that you can run, but 24 attack is nothing to discount. Where this item has its main effect is when you're out of combat, and it's one of the first out of combat items we're going to talk about today. When you're out of combat, you gain 20% bonus movement speed, which is very noticeable. What's defined by being out of combat is if you either receive damage or you deal damage, and that's it. Activating a move does not put you in combat. Even activating your Unite move isn't going to put you in combat. But the moment you've dealt damage to anything, whether it's a neutral Pokemon or an enemy Pokemon, or you've received damage from either one of them, you'll immediately be entered into combat, and all of your out of combat effects will be turned off. So how is this item useful? You know, it takes 7 seconds to exit combat. It doesn't help me to farm faster because I'm going to be getting into combat. It doesn't help me in team fights because I'm going to be in combat for so long. Where does it actually really help me? Well, its primary use case is to be able to traverse across the map as fast as possible without dealing damage to anything. And the only time that's really useful is at the start of the game if you're trying to jungle invade. So if you're playing level 1 Gradient, jungle invade, you want to play Lucario jungle invade, Floatstone is the item that will enable you to be able to do that. Those Pokemon both also happen to be physical based attackers, so they can put that attack stat to good use as well. So it's good for that use case. And then outside of that, on certain Pokemon like Decidueye, who might not engage combat very often, you can use this to maybe better line up your Spirit Shackles from range before you've hit someone with Shadow Sneak. And you just get a flat 24 attack, which scales off all your moves anyway. So it has very situational use cases, and situationally it can be kind of okay. Not the best item in the game, not an item I would prioritize very heavily, but it does have its use cases, and I don't anticipate this item will get major buffs, because when it is good on Pokemon, it's pretty good on them. And I wouldn't want this item to be even stronger for jungle invaders. So I think it's in a good spot. I don't think it's a great item, but it's in a decent spot. Aeos Cookie is the HP equivalent to the stacking items, whether it's attack weight, whether it's special attack specs. The only Pokemon that, in my opinion, are going to get good mileage out of this are, one, the Pokemon you see listed, so Pokemon that have any kind of scaling based on their max HP. So Snorlax with Flail deals more damage depending on a percentage of the HP they're at and based on their max HP. And I think their Unite move heals more based on max HP, so there's some value there. Grident's berries heal more depending on how much max HP they have. Slowbro has a way to manipulate their HP with how their passive works, and it delays damage. So on all these Pokemon, Cookie can be seen as a valuable item. And it's a good item if you're able to regenerate the amount of HP that you miss out on. So this item is going to increase your max HP when fully stacked by about 1400. If you have a way to take 1400 damage or more and then heal it back up back to your max, you're going to get a lot of good value out of this item. But because we only have 3 item slots, the superior 1 slot tank item or survivability item is generally just going to be focus spend. It still interacts with your max HP because it heals based on how much missing HP you have, and it doesn't have the condition that you need to pre-stack it. We've seen some people use Cookie on Pokemon like Greninja because increasing a squishy Pokemon's low HP pool by a large flat amount results in them getting a higher percentage of an increase in HP. But generally, those items are very situational. You're playing around it. You're playing around the unexpected factor. Anyone can put Cookie on, but it's not that great. We've seen it on, like I said, Greninja. We've seen it on Absol. In other regions, teams have ran it. It's never going to be the meta build on those types of Pokemon, but situationally, if you're trying to throw your opponents off guard or play a little bit different to be unexpected, it can work. But for the most part, this item goes up against Focus Band a lot of times on a lot of Pokemon, and Focus Band is going to be the superior item at keeping you alive. Assault Vest is a pretty good item, to be honest. If we had draft and we knew exactly what Pokemon we were going up against, this item could see some value. Like if you're up against a team that was like Gardevoir Blastoise as their top lane Blastoise, jungle Gardevoir, and then bot lane Pikachu or Venusaur or something, this item could get some value. But on the ladder, you never know what you're playing against. And also, like Floatstone, this item's special effect that you get only activates when you go out of combat. So every time you go out of combat, you gain a 15% max HP shield. And then that shield only works against special attack damage. So it protects you decently well against special attackers, but even on tanks, it's kind of hard to get out of combat to activate this for a second time. So a lot of times it's like, as a tank, you can go into a fight with an additional 15% HP against the special attack sources, which can be valuable. But, you know, unless you're going to be able to reliably get a second or third shield off, I can't see how it's going to be incredibly broken. And I don't see how you could do that. The baseline 42 special defense you get also is pretty good. It adds up to being about like 4 to 5%, I think, effective HP against special attack damage. So with Pokemon that have like really high HP pools, increasing their special defense as well as getting the special defense shield into a team of heavy special attackers could be good. But again, like if this item is going up against Focus Band is going to be a lot better. Even Cookie can be a more valuable HP item at times, because Cookie doesn't have that downside of having to leave combat. You just have to get healed up, which your teammates can do for you, or you could do on your own. And it is valuable against all sources of damage. So it could be really, really good, and it could be really, really useless. So be careful with this item for sure. So Rocky Helmet, and I'll explain how this item works, because the in-game description of this item is actually just wrong. Item on Unite DB reads, after absorbing enough damage, deal % damage based on your max HP to nearby enemies. And that damage that you deal is 10%. No, sorry, it's 5% of your max HP, as long as you've taken 10% damage in one instance. So if you're getting hit by like Charizard's autos, for example, none of them are ever going to deal, unless it's like, you know, there's a massive level gap and a crit happens, none of them are going to deal 10% of your damage in one individual tick, right? But think about getting hit by something like Power Up Punch or Belch, like these really big damage instance moves, or even something like Blissey's, you know, Pound in the early game, or Snorlax's Tackle, right? Damage moves that deal big damages in one instance. They can activate Rocky Helmet. Once your Rocky Helmet gets activated, in a small AoE around you, you deal 5% of your max HP to everything. So that actual activatable part of this item, its use case, as far as I can tell, is gonna be traditionally against things on Pokemon, on melee Pokemon that are walking up to last hit in your lane. So if you put, you know, and this is something we've tried, right? If you put Rocky Helmet on like Blissey, for example, you know, you can wait for, if the enemy Blissey goes to pound you and their pound doesn't last hit the Audino and leaves it at like 1 HP, you could have your Rocky Helmet proc and take that last hit. So, you know, it might be useful there, but in general, the amount of use case you get from that proc is very, very small. It's not very high. And it happens in such a small radius around you that it's generally only going to be useful for melee Pokemon. That being said, if your Pokemon has a high HP pool and a low defense pool, and this is true for Blissey, who has the highest health pool total in the game and the lowest defense out of all the tanks, all the defenders and supporters in the game, Rocky Helmet, and it's kind of true from VGC and the other games as well, right? Rocky Helmet actually will provide you with decent amount of effective HP against physical attacks. So if you knew you were playing against all physical attackers on the enemy team, Rocky Helmet could be a decent choice after you already have a focus band equipped. So you could be like Buddy, Focus, Rocky Helmet if you knew the enemy team was like, you know, Decidueye, Absol, Garchomp, stuff like that, right? It also makes it so that if a Decidueye goes to Spirit Shackle you and they're not pinpoint on last hitting whatever they're trying to last hit, you know, they leave it at 1, you could steal it with Rocky Helmet. So the item definitely could be good, but it's outclassed by most items in the game, most defensive items in the game, and its active component just isn't strong enough. The reason why I wanted to really explain how this item works is because in the game, the description here says deal % damage based on the opponent's max HP, which would make this item a lot worse, you know? 5% of Blissey's HP at level 15, you're never going to beat level 15 Blissey, right? But that's 500 damage because Blissey has 10,000 HP, right? If it was based on the person that hit you, like the Decidueye, who only has like 4,000 or 5,000 HP, it'd be literally half. So it is based on the wielder's HP, not the damage dealer's HP. I don't know why the in-game description's wrong. This item's been tested well enough that that's just how you should understand the item works. And then the last item, the fourth item in this set, is leftovers. Kind of sad, to be honest, that this item sucks, considering those of you guys that have history of playing Pokemon games. This item has been seen for a very long time as either like a meta item or a staple item, or at the very least, it's never been an awful item to use. You know, it might suffer from opportunity costs where other items are better or more useful, but this item's never been bad in other Pokemon games, as far as I know. In this game, it's absolutely horrendous. Compared to other tank items, it gives you less HP. Even Rocky Helmet and Assault Vest give you more max HP. So for whatever reason, it doesn't give you more than they do. The HP recovery that you get baseline is 9 HP. And I only learned this today, but this 9 HP recovery that you get only gets applied every 5 seconds. So every 5 seconds, you get 9 HP here, which, what are you going to do with that, dude? It's literally nothing. And then if you happen to be out of combat, you can activate the leftovers proc, which is 2% HP per second, which even then, that's not very useful. Because in the time that it'll take you to get out of combat and heal, you could just back and walk to lane faster, or pick up a berry, or get sent home by your by a Hoopa. You could probably even walk back to base and walk back before this would fully heal you up. So yeah, this item is not very good. It seems to be the item that they give for free, and I think that they made this item to teach new players about how items work. You know, you can put it on, it's not going to interrupt your gameplay. It teaches you how being in and out of combat works. It's a very familiar type of item, but it's not a good item. I've thought about use cases for this. I've thought about playing like Floatstone, Leftovers, Shell Smash, Crustle, and just running around really fast, never having to go back to base and just healing off. But it just, this item from a power level perspective is very weak. If this value is 9% per second, I would actually give this item a little bit more credit than people give it already. But this item, this 9 happens every 5 seconds. And also some people think that this gives you +9 on all your HP recovery moves. So if Snorlax goes to rest, he's going to get extra 9 healing per rest proc or something. That's also not how this works. It only gives you HP over time. It does not buff any outside sources of HP recovery. If it did that, maybe this item could be a little bit better, or if it was every second. But this item needs buffs before it's usable. I would not get this item to level 30. I would not use this item. You're literally better off running Cookie and, you know, getting like 1 stack or whatever, or Assault Vest or Rocky Helmet or any of the popular items we've already talked about. So we've done Emblems 101, we've done Held Items 101. I think the next one I'm probably going to do, and this is because of all the questions you guys have asked, is around hidden mechanics. For those of you guys that are curious, a lot of the hidden mechanics that I am going to be going over are available right here on UniteDB. So we can go over in depth on how ratios work, how the defense formula works, how damage reduction works, exactly how your Unite move charges. We can go over hidden, I guess this might be niche mechanics, around how Charizard works with Muscle Band and Scope Lens. We can talk about how the blue buff and the red buff works. And we can talk about anything that might be, people might not be aware of, things that aren't explicitly stated. So if you have things that you're unsure of, whether you put in the YouTube comments for this video or you reach out to me in Twitch chat, I will, I'll make sure it's included in the next class.